Today we're going to talk about philosophy and social media. There's this bit that the late night host Jimmy Kimmel does. I'm sure you've seen it. He has celebrities come on his show and read mean tweets about themselves.
Idris Elba is ugly. John Hamm is a soft boy with a dad bod.
I bet Zendaya's feet smell like Funyuns.
He does this routinely on his show. He has the most beautiful, glamorous, most famous people publicly subject themselves to the cruelty of the internet. The joke works, I think, in part because the high are brought low. We see the most popular, most attractive people in the world called ugly and talentless and uninteresting. More recently, Tom Segura and Christina Pazitsky have started doing this bit on their podcast, Your Mom's House, where they look at mean comments on just random videos posted by regular people.
Shut up. 1,000 likes. This is one of the biggest ones that goes, people just write hate. Ignore all the positive comments. 70,000 likes. 70,000 people. It's like sport. It's like sport for hate, you know?
I feel like it's just, it's getting darker and darker.
Oh.
So this is a very familiar phenomenon. People are mean on the internet. Cruelty and unkindness are very common in online spaces. It's a dimension or an aspect of the internet, of online life that we all recognize. And to an extent, we've all just come to accept. We've all seen mean comments. Probably most of you have received mean comments. I've had a taste of this. No joke. I replied once to a tweet about grammar on Twitter and then got accused of contributing to the downfall of Western civilization. I recently came across this Reddit post about a woman who divorced her husband because he refused to stop trolling children online. My husband is a troll. He leaves horribly mean comments to all kinds of people. So I looked at the browser history to find him also harassing teenagers on Tumblr. It horrified me to think this was the man who could be raising our daughter with me in a few months. This guy basically destroyed his marriage and blew up his family because he couldn't stop bullying kids on the internet. Hopefully none of you are addicted to trolling or internet cruelty, but I think if we're honest with ourselves, we probably are often tempted to be sarcastic, to dunk on people, to roast people, to partake in internet snark. And sometimes this is all in good fun. This is part of what is fun about being on the internet. But I do think it's worth thinking about. I do think the internet and social media in particular encourages us to get on our high horses, to be self-righteous, to belittle other people in ways that we would not do IRL, as the kids say. That's in real life if you're over 40. Now, I'm a professor of great books, so when I encounter a problem or a question that I want an answer to, like why are people so mean on the internet, I tend to turn towards the inherited wisdom of the past. Now, you might think that's weird to look to old books to answer questions about modern technology. What would someone who lived 2,000 years ago know about social media, right? Fair question. But the thing that's common between now and then is us, human beings. We're still the same animal now that we were back then. On a kind of fundamental basic level, we share similar hopes and fears and anxieties and appetites and drives. And here's my theory. The reason social media has taken over our lives over the past 2 decades is because on some level, it is feeding our appetites and our drives. It's speaking to these hopes and anxieties that we have as human beings. Social media's success has to be explained by the way that it feeds these deep human desires and needs. So what needs is it fulfilling for us? This is where philosophy becomes really helpful because it can help us understand things about ourselves, like these very fundamental desires and needs. So we're going to investigate this together. By the end of the video, I think we'll understand that better, why we are all not just enraptured by social media, but why does it make us so mean? And we'll start by exploring how the internet gives people licenses to be jerks. So there's a very famous story. You've probably heard of it. In fact, I know you know something about it if you've ever read or watched The Lord of the Rings, because this is one of the stories, maybe the story, that inspired J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm talking about the story of the Ring of Gyges, which can be found in Plato's Republic. Plato was an ancient Greek philosopher, and the Republic is maybe his most famous work. It's a long dialogue about justice, which is mostly organized around a lengthy thought experiment about the ideal city. Like, what would the perfect city look like? So in Plato's Ring of Gyges story, there's this shepherd, and one day There's a violent thunderstorm and a massive earthquake, and this chasm opens up in the ground. The shepherd goes down into the chasm, and he finds this bizarre thing. It's like a tomb or a casket shaped like a horse, and there's windows into it, and inside he can see the corpse of a giant wearing a gold ring. So the shepherd takes this ring, and he discovers that when he puts it on, he becomes invisible. So what would you do if you had the power to become invisible? The shepherd in this story turns out not to be a very good guy. He uses the ring first to seduce his queen, and then to assist her in the assassination of the king so that the shepherd can usurp the throne. And in Plato's Republic, this story, the Ring of Gyges, is presented to us as an image of someone who does bad things and suffers no consequences. The ring allows its wearer to do selfish, unjust, criminal things and get away with it because no one sees you doing them. And this is the question Plato wants us to consider. If you do something bad, something cruel, even something criminal, but nobody sees you do it, nobody knows that it was you who did it, do you suffer any consequences? Do you suffer psychological, moral consequences? Or do you get away with it? Do you get away scot-free? So let's think about how this applies to people being mean on the internet, to cruelty online. Anonymity is a big part of life on the internet. It's pretty common for people to adopt personas, to use usernames that disguise their real identities in the real world. In some cases, this anonymity is good. You can ask sensitive questions about parenting or your health without revealing your identity. If you're exploring some aspect of your identity, like if you're gay or trans and you don't live in the most supportive community, you might be able to go online and find a supportive network with some amount of security, anonymity, safety. So internet anonymity isn't necessarily bad, but when we think about the way that anonymous people behave online, it's hard not to think of the Ring of Gyges. Invisibility can embolden people to do and say terrible things. What was true like 2,500 years ago is also true today. When no one can see you, you might feel liberated and more willing to give in to your darker impulses.
The ring is mine.
So part of the reason the internet seems to bring out the worst in us is its anonymous quality, our capacity to hide our identities. Because we can hide our identities, we might be more emboldened to do and say antisocial things. So you might think if you got rid of the anonymity, that would maybe, prevent people from being so mean on the internet. If people have to put their name and their face to things they say online, they might be a little more cautious, if their reputation is at stake. And I think this does help a little bit. I think this might eliminate some of the worst kinds of speech on the internet. But the weird thing is, when we are ourselves online, like when we're online with our real name and our real face, I think it makes us subject to a different kind of temptation. So let's go back in time again, not 2,000 years this time, but just to the year 2006 and the very beginning of the Facebook. Again, if anonymity is the root of all evil on the internet, you would think that making our identities public would solve that problem. And when Facebook came on the scene in 2006, this was its major revolutionary contribution to online life. When you used Facebook, you would appear on the internet as a real person with your real name. If you're old enough to remember the very early days of Facebook, you might remember that initially it was only available to college students. You needed a real university email address in order to sign up.
What is the Facebook exactly?
It's an online directory that connects people through universities and colleges through their social networks there.
This had the effect of providing a kind of guarantee that when someone signed up for Facebook, they were signing up as themselves. They were representing themselves online more or less as they appeared in the real world. But this turned out to be a revolutionary change on the internet. On the internet, people were accustomed to adopting different personas, to using usernames to disguise their identity, to showing up anonymously. But Facebook kind of guaranteed that you had to show up with a more or less authentic representation of yourself. You could perform an identity online, but it was supposed to be more or less consistent with the identity you were performing out there in the real world.
I think that the goal that we went into it with wasn't to make an online community, but sort of like a mirror for the real community that existed in real life.
Everyone has an identity that they want to express and friends and family that they want to stay connected with.
But these new conditions, I think, created a new kind of problem. Because as human beings, while we find anonymity liberating, we find attention intoxicating. By nature, human beings are performing all the time. I'm wearing a tie right now. There's a kind of performance going on here of professionalism and expertise. Facebook and Instagram and these other social media platforms, they provided us with a new kind of performance space, but they allowed us to perform our identities in ways that were familiar to us in the offline world, IRL. What really happened with social media, with Facebook, like why it exploded in popularity, I believe, is because it allowed these modes of performance that we were very accustomed to, that we were very comfortable with. It allowed that kind of performance to migrate onto the internet. Remember when I said that social media's success has to be rooted in these fundamental human desires. It must fulfill some deep and basic human need. Social media didn't become popular because it was new. It became popular because it tapped into something very, very old, our deep desire for other people's attention and recognition. This is a fundamental human need, and social media became a new tool, a new vehicle for us to satisfy that need. Let's go back to Plato for a second. Elsewhere in the Republic, Plato gives us an account of the human soul and how it works. We get this account of a three-part soul, sometimes called the tripartite soul. And you might think, souls? I don't believe in souls. This all sounds sort of superstitious. But understand that the ancient Greek word for soul is psyche, which we might translate as psyche. This is the root of our word psychology, right? Psychology is really just the study of the soul. So in the dialogue, we're given this model that the soul has three parts. The soul has a rational part. This is the part of you that does all the decision making, right? And then there's also an appetitive part. This is the part of you that desires and wants things. And then there's this third part, this spirited part, which seems to be concerned with things like anger and the desire for glory. The word for this part, the spiritedness in ancient Greek, is thumos. And it's a distinct part. It's separate from your rational or your desiring part. And this makes sense when you think about it. It makes a lot of sense when you think about competition, or especially competitive people. Sometimes we want to win a contest or a game so badly it doesn't make any rational sense, right? We might even be willing to fight with our friends or damage our relationships because we so badly want to win a board game. Or we might want to win a race or something, and we're willing to endure pain and suffering. We'll endure thirst. We'll endure hunger. We'll put our body through intense pain because we have a desire to win or accomplish something. The political theorist Francis Fukuyama has some helpful commentary on this idea of spiritedness. Thumos is something like an innate human sense of justice. People believe that they have a certain worth, and when other people act as though they are worth less, when they do not recognize their worth at its correct value, then they become angry. Anger is a potentially all-powerful emotion, capable of overwhelming natural instincts like hunger, thirst, and self-preservation. But it is not a desire for any material object outside the self. It's a desire that the person who evaluated us too low should change his opinion and recognize us according to our own estimate of our worth. Social media is very good at efficiently supplying us with recognition, feeding this part of our souls that cries out for attention. When we post a take online and we get a like from a stranger, we feel good about ourselves, like we've contributed something worthwhile, we've said something smart or witty. When we get 10 or 100 likes, and when we get a bunch of shares or retweets or whatever, We feel like we have the support and the admiration of our peers. We feel even better. Social media companies often represent themselves as platforms for conversation. When Elon Musk took over Twitter, he talked about it as the public square of the internet. Meta talks about Facebook as a place to connect. And when they launch Threads, they suggest this is a place for conversations online.
We are launching Threads, an open and friendly public space for conversations.
But I think this is a misunderstanding of the value proposition of social media. These platforms are actually thumotic economies where we go to seek out the recognition of others. What we very quickly learn in these social media spaces is that the thing that produces recognition, that gets engagement on the internet, is anger. The most reliable way to get responses out of people is to show anger and solicit anger. Even comedy kind of works this way, right? Like comedy has an edge to it, and it's often about domination, right? Like putting one person up and another person down. Jokes often succeed because people like to see other people get dunked on. When we see the high brought low, it makes us feel like we're up here. One of the things we sometimes say about social media is it's just a vehicle for self-promotion. This is another way in which we're participating in this thumotic economy. And for some people who are athletes or who are exceptionally beautiful or people who have some kind of cool talent, these platforms provide avenues for getting the attention and recognition of others. But for most of us, the quickest, cheapest, easiest way to get recognition, to feed that thumotic part of our soul, is through snarkiness, dunking on someone, putting someone down, stating an unpopular opinion that we secretly hope is very popular. The mean or dismissive or cruel comment is the currency of social media, because that's the surest, safest path for the average person to satisfy that deep, spirited need in their soul. In this way, the internet, social media, these technologies, they nudge us. They just push us a little bit towards cruelty and showing contempt for other people, because we naturally seek out recognition. And the internet has provided us with this really efficient mechanism for satisfying that deep human need. A while ago, I kind of bailed on Twitter. I don't really post on Twitter anymore. Back when I was on Twitter, part of the way I tried to navigate this problem was adopting for myself a no snarkiness rule. I would compliment people, I would promote myself, I would laugh at jokes, but I tried not to just dunk on people or post critical takes just to farm engagement. It can be hard. The temptation, I think, is real. And sometimes it feels important, and maybe it is important to speak out and condemn certain things on the internet, to criticize certain bad opinions. Maybe that is a public service. But I think it's important that we be aware of the ways we are participating in these thumotic economies and what kind of payoff we're getting psychologically. It's worth thinking about whose recognition you are looking for. Whose recognition are you seeking out? And is it really going to satisfy you to get the recognition of randos on the internet? Is that just junk food for our souls? Expressing yourself, sharing things you're proud of, creating things, I think that's probably valuable. But I think we've got to be careful about the temptations of social media, the temptations of these thumotic economies. Leave a comment below. Not a mean comment. Don't say mean things. But leave a comment. Let me know if this makes sense to you. On this channel, I use classic texts, philosophy, literature to try and help us make sense of our very weird contemporary lives. From here, you should check out this video I made on social media, free speech, and 17th century poet John Milton. Click the link. I'll see you there, and I'll talk to you soon.